You are listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 321.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How's everybody doing today? Hope you're all doing well. And I am recovering from a long weekend with my family. I have a sister that lives in Northern Kentucky in the same area that I do. And this year we hosted Sisters Weekend. We come from a family of 7 girls and 1 boy. So all 5 of our sisters descended upon the greater Cincinnati area, joined us here in Northern Kentucky for 2 nights, and we spent 3 days and 2 nights going to museums, restaurants, pubs, visiting, taking walks. I know there was some crocheting and knitting that went on, enjoying each other's company, and we finished the weekend yesterday with a brunch here in our home. So it was a lot of fun to be together. Our brother was able to join us yesterday, and it's really great that we can take time to do these things together. And we had an absolutely gorgeous weekend weather-wise. So it was a lot of fun, and just wanted to share that before I dove into our interview today. And also I want to let you know that I am hosting a live boot camp on Monday, November the 4th through Thursday, November the 7th. So if you want to turn your recipes, stories, and memories into a beautiful keepsake cookbook, this boot camp is for you. I don't want you to wait any longer to create the cookbook that you've always dreamed of. I'm going to provide structure, support, and tools so that you can turn your favorite recipes and stories into a keepsake cookbook that you will be proud of. What we're going to do over the 4 days is look at how to gather and organize your recipes, designing your cookbook with ease, planning to finish your book. I'm going to help you break it down into simple and manageable steps. And then we are going to explore publishing options for your book. This boot camp will take place over 4 days with teaching every day and plenty of time for question and answer. So if you are interested in joining the boot camp, head on over to www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/bootcamp. And I also have linked to that below in the show notes. So today on the podcast, I am excited to have an interview with Sonja Overhiser. She is one of the creative minds behind the award-winning blog, A Couple Cooks. Along with her husband, Alex, Sonja has built a global following for their healthy plant-based recipes and expertise in cocktails. Their work has been featured in Food and Wine, The Washington Post, and their blog receives millions of visitors each month. Today on the podcast, Sonja and I dive into their journey from fast food to cooking with scratch, the growth of their blog, and the behind-the-scenes process of pitching and reconfiguring their cookbook concept to land a publishing deal. Sonja also shares insights on their new book, A Couple Cooks, along with offering some very practical tips for aspiring cookbook writers who want to test their recipes in a way that involves their audience. So without further delay, let's dive into this interview with Sonja Overhiser. Hi, Sonja. Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, excited that you're here. Before we dive in and talk about your beautiful new book, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, I am one half of A Couple Cooks, a food blog, or we may say recipe website these days, that I write and photograph with my husband, Alex. And we are 2-time cookbook authors. We have a book called Pretty Simple Cooking that came out in 2018, and we're now authors of A Couple Cooks, 100 Recipes to Cook Together.
Great.
Out today.
Yeah, out today. So this is very relevant and of the moment. And I asked before we started recording, but I have to ask again. How is launch day going?
It is great. It feels like my birthday times 100, and also kind of like giving birth. So
Yes.
combine all that together, having a baby on your birthday and maybe Christmas thrown in there too. So it feels really good.
Good. Well, congratulations. That's a beautiful book. Let's tell everyone about it. So I know that you have written another book and you all have been working together, obviously, on other projects. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey into your recipe website and the work that you do with Alex?
Sure. Well, we actually had no expertise in food whatsoever. So some of your classically trained listeners might might have opinions about that, but we're actually self-taught home cooks. We did not know anything about food when we met. We actually met in college on the first day of freshman year, and so we've known each other through many different eras. And in that era, we did not know how to cook. I could microwave a hot pocket, and Alex could cook a pasta. He could boil water and put pasta in, but that's really all we could do. And we ended up getting married out of college and bought our first house. And we said, we want to have people over for dinner. And we realized we had nothing to cook for them unless they wanted to have microwave meals. So we decided we wanted to start to learn to cook. We started getting cookbooks, we started watching cooking shows, and we started just surrounding ourselves with people who love to cook. And since I know you love cookbooks, I'll talk about one of my biggest inspirations is Julia Child. So around that time, I started watching some old Julia Child shows, and just really fell in love with her personality. And she said, anyone can cook. It doesn't matter if you have any background or not. And so I was really encouraged by her through shows and then just real life people who love to cook. And so we started learning and discovering the joy of cooking together. We found it could be fun, could be something we do as, a pastime, and it could result in a really amazing meal that tasted better than anything that we could get at a restaurant. And so we just fell in love with the process. And around that time, we had a personal blog, and we just started posting pictures of food, and we decided maybe we'll go ahead and start a food blog. And this is kind of around the time food blogs were really getting started. And in 2010, we decided to start our website. So there had only been food blogs for a couple of years at that point. And we decided to jump in. It was just a hobby. We never thought it would grow into anything beyond that because, there wasn't even social media back then. And then obviously technology spiraled and created so much opportunity, and we were able to leave our full-time jobs in 2017 to work full-time on the website. And then we were able to publish a book, which was my dream. I went to school for journalism, so we were able to publish a book the next year in 2018. So it felt like, this whirlwind of something we never imagined. There wasn't the creative imagination for that kind of job back then. But I'm so grateful to have fallen in love with food and cooking together, and then be able to do that as my career, to write about food and encourage other people to learn how to cook.
Yeah, and I think that people that want to learn how to cook, and even people that want to dive into writing about food, I think it's a misnomer that you have to be classically trained to do it. And in fact, if your audience is home cooks, who better to write about that than people who cook from home?
Absolutely.
So it's funny though, your concern about that is in the reverse, an objection that a lot of people have to not wanting to write a book of their own because they say, I'm not classically trained. So I think that we need to embrace who we are, where we are, what we're doing. And you're a perfect example of how, if you leverage that for the benefit of other people, it can definitely pay off. Tell us a little bit about your first book, Pretty Simple Cooking.
Yeah, so that book, our website originally started as a vegetarian and vegan website. We've since expanded to seafood and chicken. So it's kind of more of a Mediterranean diet lifestyle now. But back in the day, we fell in love with how good vegetables could taste and how great they were. for your body. And when we first were discovering food, we read the book Food Matters by Mark Bittman, and just really started to embrace the concept of just eating more vegetables. And so our first book, Pretty Simple Cooking, is vegetarian and vegan. It's all about how eating that way, full of vegetables, can actually be simple. Because at the time there was a lot of like mystique around it, like what does this mean? And since then there has been so much written about that. There's been so much demystified about the process of eating vegan meals, and there's been so much more interest in it as well, which is really exciting to see. But at that point we said, we want to write just a manual of practical meals you can make. It can be pretty simple to eat in a vegetable filled way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was in 2017. Did you say 2017, your first?
2018.
2018. Yeah. And then now we have your new book, A Couple Cooks. So I would like you to explain about the journey to this book, because it was had a few twists and turns that maybe you didn't expect, but I think it obviously ended where it was supposed to. So tell us a little bit about how you got to the publishing contract for this book.
Yeah, so we got the idea during the pandemic when we were shut up and with just each other, and we're craving something creative to do. And as you know, and some of your listeners may know, writing a book is a lot of work, and you don't even want to tally up all the hours, because then you'd just be horrified at how much time you spent and how much love you poured into it. And so it's hard to think about writing a book again. But we decided, okay, we feel like it might be time to try another one. And so we brainstormed concepts, and we came up with this concept called the short list, which was all of the recipes that we make on repeat. So we have a website, and we have a lot of readers who tell us when they love something and when they make it multiple times. And for us, that's a big indicator of, yes, this is a great recipe, one that somebody wants to make multiple times in a month or in a quarter or whatever. So we had that idea of like the short list of all these recipes worth repeating was the concept. And we thought it was a great concept, and our agent thought it was a great concept, and we shopped it around. And it turned out none of the publishers thought that it was a concept that they needed to purchase at that time. We got a lot of positive, like, oh, we love Alex and Sonja, but we're not looking for that type of book right now. And so that was really hard, as someone who considers themselves a cookbook author, to be like, wait, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm a one-hit wonder. And so we went back to the drawing board, and we said, okay, what would be something that's a saleable concept? And I think this is our big learning from this whole process, is to think about the way that something is marketed. And there are so many, people in other genres that do this so well in music or in other art forms, is like, okay, maybe what's there is great, but we just need to package it differently. So we thought, okay, what if we package it as a book about cooking together? We know that there is a market for wedding gift books about couples cooking together in the kitchen. We don't want to write a pigeonholed wedding book, but what if it's about two people cooking together? What if it works for weddings? It works for anniversaries. It works for housewarming gifts. And so we really tried to think of that function of the gift. Everybody needs to buy a gift for a holiday or housewarming or a shower, and it's really hard to think of gift ideas. And so we thought, like, let's try to create that gift. And so we came up with this new concept. We pitched it with a different title, actually. It was going to be called It Takes Two, but essentially we decided this is what we're going to try again with. And we went specifically to the publisher that we wanted, and we said, here's what we want to do, and they said yes. So
and did you use an agent also again to pitch that to them through an agent, or did you pitch without your agent? Yeah,
we did. Yeah. Yep. And she was extremely supportive. I can't say enough about our agent. She saw our vision from the beginning.
Yeah.
She knew that we wanted to change publishers. So that's a whole other conversation around our publisher is different for the second book.
Yeah.
And she was ready to just turn around and try a new concept. And she has been so supportive. I can't say enough about her.
It seems to me it would make sense, though, that the publisher might switch since the type of book it is so different.
Yeah, and that was something that we were really intentional about, of like, we are really, our first book was very practical, it was like a good practical manual. And we were like, we want to infuse more fun, more artistry, more just life into this next book. And so we have always loved Chronicle books and the books they've put out. And so we had our sights set there. And so, yeah, they've done an amazing job. We were so thrilled to see the print quality, the pages, the glossy pages are beautiful. It's a hardcover. It has a shiny gold on the cover. So all of those exciting things that people who are book nerds care about.
Yeah, and it really does look like a gift book. And the other thing it has that I haven't seen in a while on new books is the dust jacket.
Yes, we were actually very surprised that was the plan for the design. And I think at first we were like, oh, really? But now that we see it in person, we love it. And I don't know if you've taken off the jacket, but under the cover is really beautiful as well. We haven't gotten to this point in our discussion yet, but there's a theme of circles and squares throughout the book. So our designer had the idea of showing how a recipe could be broken down between two people if you were cooking it together, using graphic icons.
Yeah.
A circle for one cook and a square for the next cook. And so they took that theme and ran with it. So the front cover has a circle and a square, and then under that book jacket there's a beautiful pattern of circles and squares that kind of looks like a blanket to me a little bit. Maybe we need to have like a throw blanket that can be paired with it.
It's really beautiful, and the wallpaper is gold. The interior, like wallpaper, the book is gold, and you see the circle and square kind of like a watermark there. And then of course the accolades for the book, or the blurbs as we call it, those are inside the front cover. And then you're right, it's glossy paper, beautiful photography, the little circles and squares indicating in the recipe steps who does what. And it is really a stunning book and would make a lovely gift. And I do think that they hit the nail on the head if that was their goal, to make it a book that people would want to buy and give away for all the occasions that you just mentioned.
Right. Yes, they really hit it out of the park. We're so thrilled with it. Yeah.
And I think it's neat to hear you say that you loved Chronicle books. You really wanted them to be your publisher. And I think that that's the reason the first one didn't get accepted by the publisher.
About that? For sure.
Right.
Yeah. So many things in life, 100%. I have other like personal things where it's like, oh, I'm so glad that didn't work out. Maybe someone you dated that you're like, thank goodness that didn't work out, because this is what was in store. So
exactly.
It's a cool story
and the other thing that you probably maybe didn't change the content a ton, you just changed the way that you were going to present the information to the publisher and to make it sellable, like you said, something that would be commercially viable and marketable for the traditional publishing space.
Exactly. And that's what I think is hard for a lot of creatives, is like, we have this idea and we really want to do this idea, and just thinking about the packaging of that in a different way is so interesting. And that's something that I've wanted to grow in professionally as well. And so this has been like the perfect learning experience for that, of like, how can you spin something to be a little more marketable, even though it's the same thing essentially.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. It's great. So let's talk about the book specifically. We've talked about the icons, the circles and the squares. And when I look visually at the recipe, what that means is, if I'm in the kitchen with Warren, that's my husband, and we're going to make one of your recipes, one of us would choose the instructions with the circle by it, and the other one would choose the instructions with the square.
Right.
He's an engineer. I've got to give him the square.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was gonna say, don't like tell him to read too much into it because it's very much not a science. It's more
Exactly.
of like a dance
Right.
kind of, and
Maybe you can pick out of a hat who's the circle and who's
right,
the square.
right,
And then
yeah,
I focus on the steps of the recipe that have the circle by them, and he focuses on the square. But it helps because we don't do that well in the kitchen together.
it's hard. I mean, it's taken us years and years and years, and it's still. I mean, there are still places where conflicts easily arise, or
Right.
you're like, "What am I doing? What are you doing? How are we going to get this together?" So it was just a fun way to kind of graphically represent that, and I think. If you're a fellow cookbook nerd, which I know you are,
Yes.
knowing like we did not want to affect the purity of our recipes,
100%.
like the way that we write them is a very standard way, and so we were trying to think of like how do we kind of show that, and so it was a really cool idea by the designer.
Yeah.
I will say that in a perfect world I would also put those symbols by all the prep steps, so all of your ingredients are listed in a mise en place. And for me, I was like, oh, I really wish I could say circle, square, who does the carrot, who does the onion, or whatever.
Yeah. Who's
But that was
pounding the chicken, who's cutting
yeah,
the vegetables, all
exactly.
that kind of stuff.
So that is something that the reader gets to figure out on their own,
Yes. Yes.
unfortunately.
Yes.
So it's not like a perfect, exactly how to break it down, but it's just kind of an idea that represents
Yeah.
the spirit.
That's right. And then that way you're not both like trying to mix the batter for something. It's like you're together in the kitchen, but working side by side on different parts of the
Right.
recipe. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it does get, kind of interesting where some steps are like put it in the oven and wait or whatever. And we're like, oh, do you say both people or do you say, I don't know. There's a lot of things where it's like, well, two people could do this or that or whatever. So there's a lot of subjectivity to it, but it was a fun process.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's unique. So tell us about one thing I also noticed, the table of contents. I love how you have it laid out. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that, or tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think naturally this book could be a 2-serving recipe book, but that's never been the way that we cooked. Even when we first got married, we never really made 2-person recipes. We would always make like a 4-serving dinner and have leftovers, or eat all of it. But we love leftovers, and I think even now it's even more important where people are so busy. Food is expensive. Like just being able to have leftovers and embrace that concept is really important. And we wanted the book to work for families as well. So we have our everyday dinners are 4-person serving, and then we have a dinner party chapter. So feeding more than 4 people, feeding maybe 8 people. We know a lot of people cook together for other people, and that's part of our story. And so we wanted to have a chapter about that. And then we did include one 2-serving dinner chapter to have, fun occasion dinners, like let's make seared scallops together and have a little date night or whatever. Or it could be with your kid or with your mom or your friend or whatever. So just some fun 2-person dinners. And then the rest of the book is, your standard sides and baked goods and appetizers. And then we made sure to have a cocktail chapter because we've gotten really into cocktails on our website. And so that's become a really fun activity that we do together. So we wanted to make sure to have some drinks in there as well.
Wonderful. And I think that's a terrific idea to have recipes to serve 4, recipes to serve bigger quantities for gatherings, and then those special recipes for just 2 people. And I love how people can think about this. Like it is nice if you think, well, I'm going to cook with my mom, or I want to maybe cook with my teenage daughter, and we just want to have a meal together, and that these are made just for 2 people. And they are kind of elevated recipes. I see truffles, I see scallops, salmon, different kinds of like a pecorino, shrimp and grits, seared New York strip, grilled eggplant, Parmesan with burrata. So a little bit more elevated, special occasion type of things.
Exactly. And that ended up being one of the most fun chapters for us to write. A lot of the recipes we write on our website are also very practical, family dinners. And so it was fun for us to be able to kind of take it up a little bit, with, as you mentioned, with the burrata or this
Yeah.
or that, and
Yeah.
just make it a fun occasion to spend time together.
Yeah. So does any recipe or two come to mind as some that you and Alex think are particularly enjoyable to cook together outside of the Just for Two chapter?
Oh, that's a great question. I've been asked this a lot, and every time I'm like, oh, which of my favorite children am I gonna pick? I think I really like the salmon piccata. Um, it's just so classic and delicious. It has some nice breading on the outside of the salmon and the capers and garlic and lemon. I just could not tire of eating piccata, and I feel like it feels very elegant with not a lot of prep. So I love that one. There's a creamy chicken skillet that I also really love. Um, and then definitely the ones that you mentioned are some highlights from the date night chapter.
Yeah. Something else I love about this table of contents is you have the recipe list under the chapter names.
Yeah, we wanted to make it easy to kind of peruse and understand the structure of the book before you jump in. And then we also have a page where we listed our top 10 recipes from the book that have the most bang for the buck, basically. Like they're the easiest, but they have the best outcome, because we're always, if we get a new cookbook, we're like, where do we start? I don't know. What do you want me to, what do you think I should make? So we did a page on that too, especially for new cooks or people just starting out.
Yeah, and this time of year, fall is in the air. I see a glazed applesauce spice cake.
Yes, that is a favorite of mine. We're actually making that to take onto live TV tomorrow. So
Nice.
that one is a big hit.
Maple glazed buttermilk cornbread.
Yes, also very delicious.
And then baked oatmeal, which would be great this time of year too, with a maple tahini drizzle.
Yes, that one is a fan favorite from our website, and we added that maple tahini drizzle, and it's so simple. It's just tahini, maple, and a little salt and cinnamon, and it makes anything taste amazing.
I bet it does. And then also a good soup, tortellini vegetable soup, and a quick and cozy chickpea curry. So those are the kinds of things that are on the where to begin list, and that's a great feature for the book as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and we did some sample menus in the back as well. I remember when I was learning how to cook, I would pore over those like meal planning sample menu pages in cookbooks, because I just couldn't quite envision, like, what do I pair with this, or how do I bring the right vibes together, or the contrast. And so that was really fun to look at the book as a whole and figure out how to pair things together. So at least I did learn that skill after all this time.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure, for someone that could just microwave a Hot Pocket, how many years ago? You've come a long way. And it's amazing though, but this is all just through being willing to get in the kitchen and practice and experiment, which brings us to the next question of some things that you really believe in as cookbook writers. And one thing you mentioned to me when I was kind of asking you about this was you have a very rigorous recipe testing program. And this is not something you just pulled out of thin air. You built this from your experience as a cookbook writer. So tell us a little bit about this recipe testing program.
Yeah, so we're really fortunate to have a blog that has had readers for quite a long time, and we have so many people who are just willing to jump in and test recipes for us. It is a huge gift because people just do it as a volunteer, and they get real excited about it, and I love it because I get to hear real-time feedback from kitchens all over the country, all over the world, all different levels of cooks. And it has really informed our recipe development process. So we are able to just ask on social media, would anybody like to be a recipe tester? And we get a lot of feedback, which has been amazing. And then we have a process of a form that we have people fill out. I'm happy to share that if that is something that's interesting to people. But there's a rating system on how it went. What did you think? Were there any places that were confusing? That type of thing. Lots of numerical ratings. And then people are easily able to take pictures and stuff. So all of that feedback is a Google form. It goes right into an Excel file for us, and then we can review all of it. We review every single one and figure out how to change the recipe accordingly if we need to, or just chuck the recipe.
Yeah.
So that has been really wonderful to really understand a lot about the way people work in the kitchen as a whole. And sometimes you'll have one or two people who are like this randomly picky about something, and you're like, okay, well, I'm still, most people liked it, so we're going to keep it in there. But most of the time it's been extremely insightful. And it's just so wonderful that people are so generous with their time.
Yeah. And I think that they're cooking anyway, they love to contribute to projects like this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I have one person who tests a ton of stuff for our website, and she's like, I just love having you tell me what to make for dinner.
Yeah.
And it's exciting that no one's ever made it before,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, 100%. So she's, getting like, I always thought too, it's kind of like early access, a little bit of insider information and what's going on. And it's fun. And I do think that people, the joke, of course, when you start talking that you're a cook, or people like, haha, anytime you need me to, I'll help you test recipes. But some people really, they mean it. And some people don't. They might test a few and they're like, okay, that really wasn't for me, which is fine too. But I think it's wonderful that you use people that love to cook and love to invest in your projects, and they'll be great promoters of your book, I'm sure, because they have a hand in it.
Yeah. Right. And they're all their names are in the back of the book. So it's really fun to be like, hey, look, there you are. You're printed. You'll be in bookstores and libraries. And so,
it's wonderful. Cool. Yeah. So in terms of being a writer, any other habits or routines that really upheld you during this time?
I will mention that my previous job was technical writing. So I worked for a company where we wrote a lot of user manuals, where we had to go understand really technical products and then write about how to use them. And so that has made me extremely user-centric, and we care a lot about the usability of our recipes and the way that they're written, the clarity, the technical correctness of them. So that is just something that I'm really passionate about. And it's very similar to recipe writing. So it's been a great way to really hone those skills of recipe writing, starting out in technical writing. So yeah, I would say if you have a chance to figure out, read a book on recipe writing or read a book on technical writing and start to understand those, ideas around usability and thinking about your user when you're writing recipes.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that something that really you all have leaned on over the years in your work, growing your food website, writing your first cookbook, moving on to writing this one, is your belief about networking.
Yes. Yeah. So for the first book, I decided to go to the IACP conference. And it was in New York that year, and it was a great conference. And I was realizing on this book launch that so many of the opportunities that I've gotten, or the people who are supporting it, were through those connections that I made at that first event, like the Washington Post picking up some things and knowing people at Food and Wine and starting to know people in the industry was huge, as well as other cookbook authors, right? People who can write your endorsements, your blurbs, people who can tell you, no, you don't need to go to culinary school. You are doing great as you are. And people, who have helped me find our new agent, or that type of thing. That has been really huge. And I'm a big people person, so I love that part of it too, of just making relationships and learning from each other. And I think the cookbook author community is so generous, so kind, so supportive. There does not feel like there is competition. It feels so supportive and friendly. And because I was treated with such kindness and generosity of spirit, I feel like, we all have to do that for each other with each new book that comes into the world. And so I'm really passionate about that aspect of forming relationships and supporting people who are at the beginning of their journey or on their 20th cookbook.
Yeah. So let's take your salmon piccata recipe, for example. There might be a recipe similar to that out in the world somewhere else
Oh,
written by
there
somebody else, right?
definitely
Which
is.
makes us start to think like competition. But what we have to
Right,
remember is that someone needs to hear about that recipe through you and Alex now.
right.
And they'll hear it in a way, if they vibe with it, that they wouldn't have heard it through somebody else.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean it's all about that branding, right? Like
Yes.
none of these ideas are new. We did not invent any of them.
Right.
But it's our spin on things, and it's our
100%.
yeah, it's our, saying like curation of things. And that's something I've been talking about in different media as well, is, as like digital media continues and as AI starts to come into the picture, that people are looking for these human connections, and they're looking for people to say like, make salmon piccata, this is something that is important, versus like a robot,
Yeah.
just randomly picking it out
Right.
of a hat. So
Right.
I think there will continue to just be a place for cookbooks and for cookbook authors to have those relationships like
Yes.
I had with Julia Child back in the day.
That's right. And she was seemed alive to you. She was
Yeah,
on video. She was telling you you could do it. She was encouraging. She was
right.
making you feel differently about cooking. And look what happened. Here you are now talking about
Exactly.
the very same thing that she was able to do. I saw in a newsletter today that the Authors Guild is going to start having stickers for the front of books that says human author.
Oh my gosh, I've heard about this. It gives me chills, honestly, to think that this is where we are. And I heard a similar story about voice, any vocal clips having some sort of, authentication that this actually came from a human.
Right. Right. Interesting.
It's mind-boggling.
It is
Yeah.
mind-boggling, but I think that as cookbook people, um, remember the human connection always over anything else, and the value of that. And if we can all keep that in the front of our mind, it will always be where it's supposed to be, which is exactly
Exactly.
why we write cookbooks and cook anyway, is
Exactly.
for people.
Exactly. Which
And
is
you know, one thing though
the
they
theme of
cannot
this book.
digitize is eating. I have to tell you that. I do know that will, I don't think digitally will ever be able to nourish our bodies.
I certainly hope not.
I
I don't
don't
know if I
think.
want to
Now,
live in that
20
world.
years from now, I might be, maybe even sooner than that, but at least as far as I know right now, something has to, we can have, my background in nutrition was with parental nutrition in hospitals, like people on IVs. And
Okay.
that's different. When people are critically ill, there are amazing ways we can get them parenteral nutrition therapy. But for people at home, children growing up, by and large, we have to consume food and swallow it. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, so I think that's on our side, I think, when it comes to cookbooks and cookbook writing.
We
So
have
as we're wrapping,
at least 20 years, like you said.
I guess. I mean, I maybe to be. I don't know. It's the Wild West. I think I'm not really sure sometimes what's going to happen next.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we talked about your Julia Child and her impact on you, but one thing I like to ask all of my guests is if you have a favorite cookbook.
Yes. Well, it is hard to pick again from all of the wonderful books. And I feel like that's what's so cool about cookbooks, is they're each written from such a unique perspective. And I have such a huge collection now, and I value every single one of them. But if I have to say a favorite, I do like to go back to that Julia Child nostalgic connection that I had with her. The Way to Cook was a book that I had very early on, and really just again connected with her in the head notes, particularly of that book. I think I always thought, head notes were generic, like some, person, nameless, faceless person wrote, "You should eat this chicken," and reading her notes was like reading a letter from someone. And that was the first time I really like connected with a book, like that a cookbook could be this like kind of personal connection with someone.
Very nice. So we'll link to that in the show notes. So it's been wonderful to have you on the show. Sonja, and I would love for you to tell everyone how they can connect with you online.
You can find us online at www.acouplecooks.com. So no of, just acouplecooks.com is the best place. Our newsletter is a fun, thriving place to hang out. So if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, it's available there on the contact page of our website. And then we're also on Instagram at A Couple Cooks.
Yeah. And is your newsletter still through your email service provider? Have you hopped over to Substack?
We were on Substack for a hot minute, then we switched our provider again. So we're back to a different provider. But yeah, I think it's a really fun new area where, social media is starting to become very noisy to me. And a lot of people I know are just even getting rid of it. And so the newsletter is kind of like back to that old early blogging phase.
Yeah. It's a wonderful way to keep in touch with people. And I do know that people really enjoy reading newsletters about food and cooking and recipes and baking. So that'll be something people can link to also when they visit your website. Yes. Well, we wish you nothing but the best with the launch of your new book, A Couple Cooks, 100 Recipes to Cook Together, and have fun out and about doing your thing. And can't wait for everyone to consider diving into this book, giving it as a gift, and checking it out and all the unique features and great recipes that it has.
Thank you so much, Maggie.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green, and until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.